You were born with a power that few ever fully realize. It's not outside of you. It's not something you earn. It's within you, right now, and it's more than just a biological function, more than instinct. It's creative energy. Sexual energy is the very force that brings life into being. Think about that for a moment. The same energy that created galaxies, that pulses through stars, that orchestrates life from a single cell, that energy lives in you. It's not symbolic, it's literal. Your sexual energy is your life force, the energy of creation itself. But here's the truth. Most people have been conditioned to believe that sexual energy is simply for physical pleasure or reproduction. We've been taught to channel it outward, to drain it, to consume it. We've never been shown how to use it to build, to heal, to transform. And yet, this energy, when elevated and consciously directed, has the capacity to rewrite the biology of your body, rewire your brain, and completely restructure the electromagnetic signature you broadcast into the quantum field. Let's break this down scientifically. The second energy center of the body, what ancient systems refer to as the sacral chakra, is not just symbolic. It's directly linked to our reproductive organs and creative centers. Neurologically and biochemically, sexual energy is connected to the release of powerful neurotransmitters and hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, testosterone, estrogen, and serotonin. These chemicals not only affect your body, they shift your state of being. When you are sexually aroused, your brain enters a high-frequency state. You are focused, present, energized. But when you begin to observe that energy instead of indulging it, when you hold it and raise it through the central channel of the body, that energy becomes something else. It becomes light. It becomes inspiration. It becomes pure potential. Ancient yogis knew this. They practiced brahmacharya as abstinence, but as the redirection of sexual energy toward higher consciousness. Modern neuroscience now shows that when you meditate with intention, when you apply breath and elevated emotion, you activate areas of the brain associated with higher order thinking, clarity, insight, and inner vision. These are the same areas activated during sacred sexuality. So the question is, what if you began to see your sexual energy not as something shameful or taboo, but as the most sacred and powerful tool you've ever been given? When you suppress it, you create frustration. When you waste it, you feel depleted. But when you harness it, when you circulate it, when you breathe it up through your spine and into your brain, you awaken a new level of genius. You become magnetic. You become intuitive. You begin to create not from effort, but from alignment, from coherence, from the unified field. This is not just a spiritual idea. This is energy in motion. Emotion and sexual energy, when infused with the heart, when it's no longer lust, but love, becomes a wave of intelligence that heals the body and aligns your nervous system with truth. That's why so many people feel drained after sex. They've only moved energy outward. But when you reverse the flow, when you move that energy inward and upward, you become radiant, you glow. Your cells begin to vibrate differently. Your body begins to regenerate. Your thoughts become clearer. You access inspiration at will. You become a generator of energy, not a seeker of it. Imagine starting every day with that power. Imagine creating from that space, not from lack, not from fear, but from pure, elevated, coherent energy. This is the blueprint encoded in your DNA. It's not mystical, it's biological, it's quantum. You are meant to be a creator, not a consumer. You are meant to use that power to give birth, not just to children, but to dreams, to art, to vision, to new versions of yourself. When you begin to transmute that energy through breath, through meditation, through intention, you break the old programs, you rise above survival, you enter creation, You move from the predictable to the unknown. You shift from hormones of stress to hormones of renewal. Your inner world becomes more real than your outer world, and you begin to collapse time. You begin to magnetize outcomes. You become the vortex through which possibility expresses itself. Because this energy, this sexual energy, it doesn't just want to express itself physically. It wants to become something higher. It wants to rise. It wants to evolve. It wants to create. Every experience you've ever had in a relationship, every touch, every word, every emotional response has left an imprint on your brain. That's not philosophy. That's neuroplasticity. Your brain is a record of the past, and every time you engage in intimacy, especially unconscious intimacy, you reinforce those same circuits, those same chemicals, those same patterns. But here's what most people don't realize. Intimacy, when it's unconscious, keeps us locked in the past. It becomes another habit loop, another place where the body, which is the subconscious mind, runs the show. And so we repeat the same relationship dynamics, the same emotional reactions, the same disconnections, and we call it love. But there is a higher way. When you bring consciousness into intimacy, you are no longer running the old programs. You are interrupting the pattern. You are taking that moment, the moment of vulnerability, of connection, of energetic exchange, and you are using it to evolve, to elevate, to become something new. Let's look at the science behind this. When two people engage in physical intimacy, especially with emotional presence, the brain releases a cascade of chemicals. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and reward. Oxytocin, the bonding chemical. Serotonin, which enhances mood and confidence. And endorphins, the natural opiates that reduce pain and increase pleasure. That's not just a cocktail of feel good. That's the neurochemical foundation for attachment, trust, and memory formation. Now here's the key, the emotional state you're in during intimacy, whether it's love, anxiety, guilt, resentment, or presence, becomes wired into your brain and body. You are literally conditioning yourself. You're training your nervous system. You're reinforcing a specific signature, and over time, that signature becomes your baseline, your familiar, your identity within connection. So, if someone carries trauma, abandonment wounds, or self-worth issues into their intimate moments, what gets encoded in the nervous system is not just physical pleasure, it's pain wired into bonding. And the body learns to associate love with suffering. That's why so many people feel confused, triggered, or empty after sex. The chemistry was there, but the consciousness wasn't. Conscious intimacy changes everything. When you enter intimacy with presence, with intention, with elevated emotion, not lust, but gratitude, not fear, but openness, you create a different neurochemical environment. You shift from survival emotions to creative emotions, from contraction to expansion, and when that happens, the brain begins to reorganize itself. You start to rewire associations. You show your body that love can be safe, that closeness can be healing, that vulnerability can be strength, that connection can exist without codependency, without performance, without judgment. And every time you repeat that, every time you bring your full awareness into the moment of connection, your brain begins to prune away old neural circuits and strengthen new ones. That's the power of Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. And when elevated emotion meets new experience, that wiring happens faster, deeper, more permanently. You're not just having an intimate experience. You're installing a new internal model of connection. But it goes even deeper. Conscious intimacy activates heart-brain coherence. When your heart is open and your brain is aligned, you enter a state of electromagnetic synchronization. Your energy field becomes more coherent. Your nervous system more regulated. And now, Two people are no longer just exchanging touch. They are exchanging information, frequency, intention. This is where transformation accelerates. Because in that field of coherence, in that union of energy and awareness, the body becomes the instrument of healing. Trauma surfaces to be released, patterns dissolve into presence, and the story of past love, of hurt, of loss, of betrayal begins to lose its grip. Why? Because you're giving the body a new experience to believe in. The body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined, but it absolutely knows the difference between love that is aligned and love that is conditioned. When you bring awareness into the breath, into the gaze, into the touch, when you stay fully in your heart, you elevate sex from chemistry to alchemy, and in that alchemy, something ancient begins to shift. The ego steps back, the soul steps forward. The body opens not just to pleasure, but to integration. The brain begins to mirror a new identity, one that's not shaped by defense or fear, but by authenticity. Intimacy becomes less about performance and more about presence, less about receiving, more about merging. You're no longer trying to get something. You're learning to become something. You're creating a version of yourself that's no longer defined by the past. You're literally firing and wiring a new future, one where connection is sacred, not scripted. Every human being is born into a biological system wired for survival, and survival, at its core, is about avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. But what happens when that ancient wiring collides with modern life? With constant stimulation, with endless novelty, with digital validation, artificial highs, and instant gratification, we become addicted, not just to substances, not just to behaviors, but to states of being. We become conditioned to associate pleasure with escape rather than evolution. Most people live their entire lives chasing emotional states that bring a momentary sense of relief. A quick dopamine hit here. A sexual release there, a scroll, a swipe, a shot, a bite, a binge. The body becomes chemically addicted to feeling good. But it's a shallow good, a fleeting rush, a momentary fix. It doesn't last and it doesn't heal. This is what we call pleasure-based conditioning. It's not pleasure itself, that's the problem. It's how unconsciously we pursue it. And when pleasure becomes the primary method for managing pain, we fall into a cycle where we no longer grow, we only numb. Let's look at the neuroscience of it. Every time you engage in a pleasurable act, especially one that's novel, surprising, or intense, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical of motivation, anticipation, and reward. But when we get that dopamine spike repeatedly and without meaning, through pornography, fast food, validation on social media, or casual sex, the brain adapts, receptors downregulate, the threshold for pleasure increases. And now it takes more stimulation to get the same feeling. This is how addiction starts. Not just to substances, but to behaviors, thoughts, emotions. We become dependent on external stimuli to feel alive. And the more we chase pleasure, the more we reinforce the neural circuits of craving, of lack, of not enough. The body memorizes the pattern, the nervous system expects the hit, and when it doesn't come, we feel empty, anxious, agitated. That's not who we are. It's a program running on autopilot. So how do you break it? You begin by observing, not judging, not shaming, observing. You become conscious of the moments where your body pulls you toward the old familiar fix. You notice the urge before the action. You become aware of the space between impulse and behavior. And in that space, you take your power back. Because in that space, you're no longer the program. You're the observer of the program. And when you observe with awareness, you shift from unconscious reaction to conscious creation. You start to rewire the brain. Neurons that no longer fire together begin to unwire. You teach the body that it no longer needs that hit, that high, that rush to survive. And instead of chasing artificial pleasure, you begin to cultivate authentic fulfillment, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. This is where meditation becomes a tool, not for escape, but for reconditioning. When you sit with yourself, when you allow the craving to rise and fall without feeding it, you teach your brain a new pattern. You train your nervous system to stay regulated in the face of discomfort. And that's where true freedom begins, not in the absence of temptation, but in the ability to transcend it. Pleasure becomes something sacred, not something compulsive. You stop needing to feel good to feel safe. You stop needing stimulation to feel connected. You move from survival to presence, from habit to intention, from chemical dependency to energetic sovereignty. It's important to remember that breaking the habit of pleasure-based conditioning isn't about denial or repression. It's about transmutation. You don't kill the desire, you elevate it. You take the energy that once moved through lower centers, through the primal, the reactive, the unconscious, and you breathe it upward. Through the spine, into the heart, into the brain, into vision. And as you do, something incredible happens. The same energy that once drove addiction now fuels awareness. The same desire that once led you outward now pulls you inward. You begin to crave alignment more than escape. You begin to experience a higher form of pleasure, the pleasure of coherence, of clarity, of living in integrity with the truth of who you are. Your brain begins to map new neural pathways. Your body stops firing the stress chemicals of anticipation and withdrawal. Your field becomes more ordered. Your energy becomes magnetic. Not because you're consuming, but because you're creating. You're no longer reacting to life. You're designing it from a place of wholeness. Discipline is not punishment. It is a form of self-respect. It is the conscious act of choosing what you want most over what you want now. And when it comes to sexual energy, discipline isn't about repression. It's about refinement. It's about realizing that this life force within you is not something to waste unconsciously, but something to cultivate, elevate, and direct with intention. Sexual energy is one of the most potent forces in the human body. It's the biological mechanism that gives life, but when it's not channeled, when it's not understood, when it's used only for gratification, it becomes a leak of energy, a leak of clarity, a leak of power. The body becomes addicted to the cycle of arousal and release, not because it's evil or wrong, but because it has been conditioned to seek momentary escape over long-term evolution. Let's go deeper. From a neurochemical perspective, the act of sexual release produces a spike of dopamine, followed by a cascade of calming chemicals, prolactin, oxytocin, and serotonin. These are beautiful when they happen in connection, in coherence, in love. But when the nervous system begins to crave that sequence over and over through compulsive behavior, the brain becomes wired for repetition, not revelation. Now the body begins to anticipate its next hit. Thoughts, images, fantasies, stimuli, they trigger the chemical cascade before any real connection has even occurred. That's not intimacy, that's programming, that's the body taking over the mind, and each time that loop completes, the mind becomes weaker and the body becomes more dominant. This is how we live in reaction rather than creation. But something radical begins to shift the moment you practice sexual discipline. That means you don't just act on the urge because it's there. You feel the energy, you acknowledge it, but you hold it. You circulate it, you breathe into it, you invite it upward through your spine, into your heart, into your brain. You are no longer letting that energy flow out. You're allowing it to transform you from within. This is where inner mastery is born. Because when you learn to govern your most primal impulses, when you stop letting chemistry dictate your choices, you build neural strength. You become the master of your own mind. You train your brain to override the default, and in doing so, you upgrade your identity. From someone who reacts to someone who creates, from someone who seeks to someone who radiates. This is not suppression. It's sublimation. You are not denying your desires. You are directing them into higher expressions of yourself. Creativity, vision, purpose, innovation, service. The same energy that could be released in seconds can be stored, elevated, and transmuted into a magnetic field of inspiration that changes your emotional baseline and amplifies your presence. Monks, yogis, martial artists, sages, they all knew this. They practiced restraint not out of guilt, but out of wisdom. They understood that if you can master your sexual energy, you can master any part of your life. Why? Because it's the most primal, the most persistent, the most powerful. If you can channel that, then emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, insecurity, they no longer run the show. You begin to live from a place of stillness, not survival. The body starts to respond differently. Testosterone levels stabilize. Dopamine sensitivity resets. Brainwave patterns shift into coherence. You start to feel less restless and more grounded, less anxious and more alive. You're not leaking your energy out into the world. You're building a reservoir of internal power. And that reservoir doesn't just affect you. It affects how others feel around you. People sense your presence before you speak. They feel your depth without needing your words. Why? Because your energy is no longer scattered. It's coherent, it's cultivated, you're not grasping, you're transmitting. Sexual discipline sharpens focus. It enhances willpower. It creates a magnetic field around you that naturally attracts synchronicities, ideas, and opportunities that resonate with your elevated state. Because the universe doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to who you are being energetically. And when you embody mastery, when your desires no longer own you, when your energy is harmonized, you emit a frequency that is undeniable. And it all begins with a choice, not to avoid your sexual energy, but to own it, to hold it, to rise above the reflex, to choose transformation over temptation. Sexual energy is not just biological. It is quantum. It is the raw, creative frequency that not only generates life, but also serves as the foundational current of who we are energetically. At its core, this energy is neither male nor female, neither physical nor mental. It is potential, waiting to be directed, waiting to be awakened, waiting to be transformed. In the quantum field, all possibilities exist simultaneously. Infinite versions of you already exist in success, in love, in higher consciousness, in perfect health. The only thing separating you from those versions is frequency. And the most powerful way to shift frequency is through emotionally charged energy, the kind of energy that sexual arousal produces at its peak. But if you don't direct that energy with awareness, the body does what it's been conditioned to do: seek release. It follows the old loop: stimulus, reaction, climax, crash. And while that cycle may provide temporary pleasure, it does not create. It does not expand you into the future. It keeps you tethered to the predictable past. In quantum terms, that means your energy field remains the same. You are broadcasting the same signal, and so you are attracting the same experiences. The thoughts you think, the emotions you feel, the habits you live, they form your energetic signature, which informs the quantum field of what version of reality to reflect back to you. Now imagine, instead of releasing that energy outward, you learn to contain it, to breathe with it, to lift it. Imagine if that same surge of arousal, instead of ending in the lower centers, is transmuted up the spine, through the energy centers, activating your heart, illuminating your mind, awakening the pineal gland. That's no longer just sexual energy, it's evolutionary fuel. You are no longer creating from matter, you are creating from energy. You are stepping into the field as a conscious participant, using your sexual energy to collapse timelines, to rewire your neural circuitry, to become the future version of yourself right now. Let's talk about what happens in the brain. At the moment of heightened arousal, the brain becomes more plastic. Neural networks become more malleable. This is when change is most possible, if guided by intention. But without intention, the brain simply reinforces the same loops. The same fantasies, the same behaviors, the same chemical addictions to pleasure and validation. With consciousness, however, that moment becomes sacred. It becomes a doorway. By bringing elevated emotion, gratitude, love, awe into that space, you begin to signal to your nervous system that you are ready to evolve. You are telling your body, this energy is no longer just for reproduction or release. It is for transformation. This changes your electromagnetic field. Your heart becomes coherent, your brain waves move into synchrony, your cells receive new information, and your body begins to feel as if the future has already happened. That's how you signal the quantum field. Not with thoughts alone, but with energy that is coherent, elevated, and intentional. Sexual energy is your creative currency. When directed with awareness, it not only increases vitality, but it magnetizes new realities to you. That's why so many mystics and ancient cultures revered this energy, not as something shameful, but as something sacred. They knew that how you manage this power determines what you manifest, who you become, and what kind of timeline you step into. This is not about celibacy, this is about conscious engagement. It's about understanding that your body is an instrument and sexual energy is one of its highest octaves. If misused, it drains. If respected, it elevates. If mastered, it creates. Quantum physics tells us that energy responds to the observer. That means your focus, your intention, your presence determines what that energy becomes. If you are scattered, impulsive, reactive, your energy stays incoherent. But when you become still, aware, disciplined, you begin to direct that energy like a laser, focused and precise. That is how personal evolution happens, not by wishing, not by forcing, but by changing your energy. When you elevate sexual energy into a higher frequency, you become a new electromagnetic being. You begin to emit the signature of a future self, one who is no longer run by primal instincts, but guided by inner intelligence. The version of you who is clear, grounded, magnetic, and wise is not somewhere far away. It already exists in the field, waiting to be accessed. And the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming is made from the energy you choose to cultivate, transform, and direct within you right now.